You're standing in a museum. In front of you is a piece of art. A painting, a sculpture, a photograph. It speaks to you. It makes you feel something. It's a window into someone else's mind, someone else's world. And you probably don't think twice about it. Art is everywhere. It's on your walls, on your phone, on your clothes. But for 99.9% of human history, art didn't exist. It didn't exist, and then it did. And the moment it appeared, everything changed. So, how did ancient humans make art? And more importantly, why did they start at all? Let's start with the oldest known art in the world. In 2018, researchers published a bombshell discovery. Deep inside a cave in South Africa, they found something that looked like a geometric pattern. Red lines crossed over each other in a simple grid. It was drawn on a piece of ochre, and it was 73,000 years old. Not painted by modern humans, painted by Neanderthals. That's the thing that makes this discovery so shocking. For decades, we assumed that art was a uniquely human achievement, a sign of our superior intelligence. But the Neanderthals were making art too. They were creating symbols, abstract patterns, designs that didn't serve any practical purpose. They were creating meaning. And they were doing it tens of thousands of years before modern humans even arrived in Europe. But that's not the only ancient art. There's also the famous cave paintings of Lascaux in France. Massive, detailed images of bison, horses, deer. They date back about 17,000 years. They were painted by early modern humans. And they're incredible. The artists used natural pigments, charcoal, ochre, clay. They ground them into powder, mixed them with animal fat or water, and applied them with brushes made from animal hair or by blowing the paint through hollow bones. The result is a level of artistry that still feels alive. The animals are in motion. They're hunting, running, dying. And the paintings are placed in the deepest, darkest parts of the cave. Places where no one lived. Places that were hard to reach. That means they weren't just decoration. They were something else. Something sacred. So what were they? Why would ancient humans go into the darkness, into the belly of the earth, to paint animals on the walls? The leading theory is ritual. The caves were sanctuaries. The paintings were part of ceremonies, perhaps meant to ensure success in hunting, or to honor the spirits of the animals they killed. Some researchers think the caves were liminal spaces, places where the boundary between the human world and the spirit world was thin. The act of painting was a way of reaching across that boundary. It was a way of connecting with something larger than themselves. And then there's the question of what the art meant. Was it storytelling? Was it a form of communication? Some of the paintings seem to tell narratives. A bison falling, a spear in its side, a human figure lying nearby. These are scenes, not just individual animals. They're moments frozen in time. And they suggest that ancient humans were not just depicting the world, they were interpreting it. They were creating meaning out of their experiences. And they were leaving that meaning for others to find. But cave paintings aren't the only art. There are also sculptures. The Venus figurines. Small, carved female figures found across Europe. They date back to about 30,000 years ago. They have exaggerated breasts, stomachs, and hips. They're clearly about fertility, about life, about abundance. They were carved from stone or bone, often small enough to carry in a pouch. They were personal objects. They were worn or held. They were probably used in rituals or worn as talismans. And they show that art wasn't just about the wall. It was about the body, about the self, about the individual. Then there's the art of the Australian Aboriginal peoples, which goes back at least 65,000 years. Rock art, body painting, sand drawings. The art was part of storytelling, part of myth, part of lore. It wasn't separate from daily life. It was woven into it. The dream time, the creation stories, the ancestral beings, they were all embodied in the art. It was a way of keeping the world ordered, of remembering, of passing knowledge down through generations. In a world without writing, art was memory. It was history. It was lore. And there's also music. Yes, music is art. and it's one of the oldest forms of human expression. The oldest known musical instrument is a bone flute found in Germany. It's about 40,000 years old. It was made from a vulture bone, with holes carved into it. Someone sat down 40,000 years ago and carved a flute. They wanted to make music. They wanted to create sound that wasn't just speech. They wanted to create something that moved people, that connected them. That's art. That's the impulse behind all art. It's the desire to create something that transcends the ordinary, that reaches for something beyond. So how did they make art? With whatever they had: stone, bone, ochre, charcoal, clay, feathers, blood. They used their hands, their fingers, their breath. They used tools they'd made for other purposes: scrapers, engravers, points. They innovated. They experimented. They made mistakes. They created pigments by grinding rocks and mixing them with binders. They created brushes from hair. They created stencils by placing their hands on the wall and blowing paint over them. They created depth and shadow by using different shades and layers. They weren't primitive. They were skilled. They were creative. They were artists. And what did they think of their own work? We'll never know for sure. We don't have their words. But we have their images. And those images tell us something. They tell us that these people had imagination. They could think about things that weren't there. They could imagine a bison on the wall, even when the bison wasn't there. They could imagine a spirit, a god, a story. They had the capacity for symbolic thought. They had a sense of aesthetics. They cared about how things looked. They cared about proportion, about motion, about color. They were, in every sense, modern minds. They just didn't have writing. They didn't have cities. They didn't have the internet. But they had art. And art was enough. So here's the strange thing. We've been making art for at least 73,000 years. And in all that time, the purpose of art hasn't really changed. It's still about expression. It's still about communication. It's still about reaching across the boundaries between ourselves and others, between the living and the dead, between the human and the divine. We do it for the same reasons they did. We just do it differently. And maybe that's the most important lesson. Art isn't a luxury. It's not a hobby. It's not a distraction. It's a fundamental part of being human. It's how we make sense of the world. It's how we leave our mark. It's how we connect with each other across time, across space, across the boundaries of death. That's why ancient art matters, because it's still speaking to us, and it's still saying, I was here, I was human, I had something to say. So the next time you look at a painting, a sculpture, a piece of music, think about the cave. Think about the handprint on the wall, 73,000 years old. Think about the person who made it. They lived in a world we can barely imagine. They had no writing, no cities, no machines. But they had the same impulse you have. They wanted to create something that mattered. And they did. It's still there. It's still speaking to us. And it's still telling us, we are not alone.